Again, is that we were talking about the impression being the kind of determining the response emotionally as well as physically, in the sense of it sets the spindle threshold. And we're talking about its reactive sensitivity can be set so that in anticipation of what you have to do by a cue, you can produce an explosive, even with very little stretch of, even with a simple operation is quickly, it's stretched by the action of the body. And rapid stretching elicits a greater myotatic response, more afferent neurons are sent to the spinal cord where it synapses and comes back to the muscle in which the spindle is embedded and produces a contractile force through motor units. But it can also be set so as to elicit that response without hardly any stretch at all. So when you perform an action, you're not only involving serioelastic component of muscle, you're involving the spindle which is embedded within the muscle itself. So that's basically how how you produce movement, how you produce power of varying degrees. And that spindle can be set, its threshold can be set, so that you can always be ahead of what you've got to do. Otherwise, in a servo mechanism, in a system which is always relying on feedback, you'd always be too late. Does that make sense?
Right. And you were saying that that's why that initial impression, acting on it immediately, is essential.
And that impression the clarity of that impression has got to be right. It can't be. That would follow that any impression, you could be doing the wrong thing. So it's the clarity and the quality of the impression, if you like, pertaining to fight, pertaining to what you need to do within the fight, and that's where motor orientation tends to fall apart. In that the focus then of the impression is on what you've got, is how you're going to do it, not what you've got to do. And so it's
not being organized unconsciously.
It's a motor orientated response rather than a stimuli orientated response. And because you then try to organize that at a conscious level, the conscious mind is simply incapable of organizing these reflex and behavioral patterns, if you like, into a movement response, because there's just too much there to organize. And so you usually end up concentrating on a part you've been told to concentrate upon, or you've focused upon because your master's performing in that particular, an idiosyncrasy of his movement, and you're focusing upon that and leaving a lot out. And that's what you were about the cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot left out, what you should have included.
And not to digress, but it's also a problem that I used to find with taking tips from you, that I used to have the problem, and I think a lot of people have the problem of you give someone a tip, and
they focus on it.
And then you over-focus on it, and then you actually get worse because you're consciously focusing on that thing.
Rather than just focusing on what you've got to do.
Yeah.
And letting that simply light a subliminal level, that would be the word. Just take it in on board, and rather make it a habit of reminding yourself of that detail of movement that you have to focus upon, rather than focusing upon it
in an exclusive way. Yeah.
That's why I say the easiest way to move is if you want movement, is if you're trying to juggle all these balls and you do want to concentrate on anything which is involved within the whole movement process, and that is the head, because the head leads and initiates action.
Right.
And in many ways, it's the target, it's the weapon, and it's the initiator of action, and the direction which your body's going to move. It's involved in that whole process, which makes sense if you're following something. You're following your head. If you watch an animal, a cat watching a fly, its whole body's adjusting to its body's adjusting to how its head is lined to what it's watching.
I'm just getting her.